Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our live Orange and Brown Talk podcast. I am Dan Lobby and I am bringing in Lance at Riseland now. I know this is working, Lance, because we've already got some folks in the chat talking to us a live Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Lance, how are you?
I'm very well, Dan. How are you tonight?
Doing well. Let's get the nuts and bolts out of the way here. Obviously, the Browns 30-10 winners in Carolina in their preseason opener is what it is with these preseason games. I'm old enough to remember the Browns going 4-0 in the preseason and then going 0-16 immediately after. But look, a lot of good to get into here today. And we're obviously going to start with the guy everyone wants to talk about. And I haven't opened up the chat yet. I'm sure when I do open up the chat, there's going to be a lot of talk about this guy, Shedeur Sanders. So give me your Cliff's notes here, and we'll really dig into what he did today. But I mean, what did you think of what Shedeur Sanders was able to do in about two and a half, maybe almost 3 quarters of work tonight?
Well, first thing I always like to say as a coach is you got to enjoy the victories. You got to enjoy the things that you do well, right? Because if you don't, then it drags on. So I thought he did a great job. I thought they all did a really good job. I thought they had a great sense of purpose, not only him, but in terms of energy and body language and things like that. But Shador did a great job. I thought first and foremost, what they've done for him, the way he played tonight is a proponent. He's not being held back. What they did, in my opinion, watching every practice, this is kind of a culmination of starting off slow, giving him some rhythm, giving him some easy throws, doing some things. The touchdown pass, the first touchdown pass was simple levels concept. Then they went to a multi read, like a stick that we'll go over next week, I'm sure, stick, and then a dagger out for the second touchdown. So he did some really good things. I thought his best throw of the night, without question, was after the first two drives of the second half, penalties, sacks. I thought the throw to Bates on the over route was the best throw of the night, not because of what it was, just because of the situation they were in. They were struggling a little bit. They had a couple tough series. He took a sack. You get some of his struggles that he had at Colorado in terms of holding onto the ball. Those things kind of propped in, and he made a great throw. But more importantly, I don't think even if he was to play not even if he played terrible tonight, he did some really good things. Like you said, can't look too much into it, but you could take a lot of positive out of it. The operation was very good. Penalties were limited. Formations were important. Now, if he is being limited on some of his stuff, that's the next step, right? And I think if that's the case, I think they've done a nice job of progressing him to this point. And I think part of his success tonight is because of the route they've taken with him and kind of making sure they build this accuracy and this tempo and this pace. And he's done a nice job. You got to give, as much criticism as he gets, as much praise he gets. He played well tonight and did a nice job leading the team.
I'm really glad you went there with his best throw, because I was going to go a different direction, but I, that drive to me. So when I was working on kind of my instant observations after the game, and or as the game was going on, and he comes out, and that drive to me stood out as, first of all, the fact that he got to play so long, right? Like you actually got to see him be a quarterback of a football team. It wasn't like two series and gone. It was, obviously he was very good in that first half, but then you come out in the second half and you end up with the two empty possessions. And you're kind of like, all right, is the momentum starting to fade a little bit? And then they get that turnover on defense, and it turns into a really nice drive. And the throw to Bates, it stood out to me as, I think one of the things he did well tonight, along with some of the really nice throws he made, was he did a really nice job of like, this is the throw that's there, and I'm going to make it. And look, he did that in Colorado too, right? I mean, that's why he had like a 74% completion percentage with the Buffaloes. But I thought that drive was a really nice sign to see, okay, the momentum's kind of fading. He's out there with some guys who are down the depth chart a little bit. Maybe this isn't going to end quite the way it started. It doesn't matter. And then he ends it like that. Puts together a really nice touchdown drive. It ends on the little end around to Larvadane. I thought that was a really good sign to see him do that. And you don't get to see that a lot in the preseason. You don't get to see guys have, it wasn't a full game, but have almost 3 quarters to where there can be real ups and downs.
Well, and the thing about it too is that he did get to go through some of those ups and downs, right? You didn't have to come out after you had a terrible series or good series. He went through some highs and lows, which I think is very important for a quarterback, especially at that level. I just think the things that he did in the pocket, right? So we always talk. You and I have been talking about since our pods last year when he was at Colorado, right? His ability to backpedal when things go wrong. You saw some of that, but for me, I also saw him step up a couple times, which tells me he's working on it. I also saw a lot more fluid footwork from underneath center and the mesh with the running backs in both in the run game and then play action game. That's all work in practice. So he's done a really nice job of improving his footwork from underneath center, improving his footwork in the gun, stepping up. Obviously, he had some scrambles that he'll go back and say, listen, for me, the scrambles are okay. What I've noticed is that those are unnecessary hits those guys have to take when you do those long scrambles and things like that. So he's got to learn to protect himself, which I think he will. But yeah, I think the idea of like it was kind of fading away. It was the second half. It's a preseason game. But I think as a whole, that's kind of what you needed to see out of the Browns, not just him. This is a team coming off a really, really bad record with high expectations. And there are no expectations, which I think is the worst thing in the world because then you become complacent. So I thought they did a nice job of keeping that momentum up. And I thought he did a really nice job. Obviously he's going to have to continue to make sure that those scrambles and things like that don't cost him big turnovers. And once again, he'll learn that. And once again, I call it like, I try to be as fair as I can. I thought he played really well, especially with the poise and the command of the offense. Now let's see how he does. Once you get past, now you're getting into the nuts and bolts here, right? Let's see how he goes when he starts getting in with the more formations and the going against starting defenses, things like that. But I think this is a really positive step for him.
Yeah, look, there were three plays I didn't like. I'll just get them out of the way. There was the crosser to Larvadane that almost got picked in the first half. I don't know if that was Shedeur's fault or if that was on the receiver. Um, and the other two things are something we talked about. If you go back and listen to our draft pod way back when, we were very complimentary of Shedeur Sanders. One of the things we mentioned was under pressure, sometimes he makes bad decisions, and not necessarily turn the ball over bad decisions, but turn his back to the line of scrimmage, run backwards, bad decisions. And he did that twice tonight. He did that early in the game. I don't know if I have my notes pulled up in front of me right now or not, but he did that early on one of the drives, and he did that on a drive. Now, I don't know if only being like a 1 yard loss, but he ran about 75 yards on the play. Those are things you have to clean up because when you are going against the best defenses, right? When you're going against starting defensive ends. And as someone asks, wasn't Carolina starting the first string in the first half for a couple of series, not the whole first half? When you're going against better defenders, you're not going to be able to get away with that. But to me, that's easy to clean up. And we did see him step up and deliver a ball in the end when he was in his own end zone with pressure. We saw him we saw him use his legs a couple of times, and he's never going to be Lamar Jackson, but he's going to be one of those quarterbacks like a Baker Mayfield or someone like that who, if you forget about him, he's going to run for a first down. Like we saw, there was just so much good there tonight that even those kind of bad plays that I circled and said, oh, those are some of the concerns coming out of Colorado. You're almost willing to just kind of throw them away and say it was his first game. I think he can clean that stuff up.
Oh, there's no question. And, the thing that you like about him too is that he had a lot of now that there's film on him, right? So for me, I want to see the next progression because they kind of went in with a game plan that I thought they would, right? Some easy throws, some stick routes, some hitches. The first touchdown was a levels concept off the boot, which is Stefanski staple since he's been here, obviously going back to before Deshaun Watson. And then they threw a little more complex route for his second touchdown. I'm interested to see now because as you get film in the NFL, as you get film at any level of football, now teams are going to start taking away those basic concepts. Now teams are going to say you're going to have to beat us with something else, and that's where the progression comes from. All these guys, not just Shedeur Sanders, but all these young guys. Like, all right, this is what people are watching. Schlesinger, people are watching Graham, who got double teamed a couple times tonight and struggled a little bit. Not all the time, did some great things too, but just that learning curve of playing against grown men and that they do it for a living. Now they're going to start taking this stuff away. Like you said, the Panthers they had their starters in, but very vanilla defense, right? Not a lot of pressures, not a lot of different fronts, not a lot of different twists, things like that. So he did really, really well, and it'll be interesting to see his next progression as he gets into more stout defenses and higher level defenses. First stringers. Be interesting.
Oh, I was muted there. Sorry, folks.
No worries.
I can usually edit that out in podcast, but we were live. Anyway, what I was saying, just in response to that comment, yes, that's true. Russell Wilson did play like that in his prime, but Shedeur Sanders is going to win differently than Russell Wilson was going to win. Shedeur is going to be a more traditional pocket passer. He's not the athlete that Russell Wilson was, but that's okay. Like he doesn't have to be Russell Wilson. It's just I'm sure they're going to be sitting in that film room saying like, don't do this. Don't run backwards. Don't turn your back to the line of scrimmage, please. And they'll coach that out of him. I'm not super worried about that. What I loved was the good things that we saw from him in Colorado, we saw in this game. That red zone accuracy is unbelievable, right? And
Hmm.
he had that in Colorado. You saw that on the tape in Colorado, and he makes, I mean, two great throws into the end zone to Caden Davis. You know, one kind of a levels play. I mean, you can kind of describe what those plays were, and another one, a low ball that only Caden Davis could get. Like, I mean, that's high level stuff in the red zone.
Well, the first one, like you said, it was almost like a progression on the touchdowns, right? So the first one is just a levels concept, right? And so you had Jamari Thrash come across the front. He was the first level. Then you had Deontay Johnson, who was on the second level. He got kind of caught up, right? And then Caven Davis, who, because they were down in the red zone, it's the high level, but the high level in the red zone kind of flattens out because of the red zone and because of the short end zone. So he did a great job of sticking that one in there. Now the next one was a pretty complex route. They actually ran a stick route, which is two little hitches over to the left. He didn't like it. He worked back to the other side, which is a dagger route, which means one guy's going to kind of occupy the middle, and the other guy, Caden Davis, is going to kind of run behind it and kind of stick in that little window there. But it's a very short window. But what made that play for me was he saw pressure coming, and everybody has been harsh on his feet sometimes and holding onto the ball, which he will work on. But he did a phenomenal job of stepping to his right, knowing where that pressure was coming, giving his back a chance to pick that up. Marshall, I thought was very impressive tonight in everything he did, picked up that blitz, and that was the key. So great recognition of where that pressure was coming from, sliding to his right, working from his left to his right. Really, that second play was a very, very good football play from Shedeur Sanders.
So overall, look, I mean, obviously Shedeur looked great tonight. But and this is gonna, I mean, I'll just put this comment up on the screen. This is gonna be the talk from now until Monday when we get to see these guys practice again. Kevin Stefanski is gonna talk on Saturday. Randy Leach says Shedeur needs to be at least number 2 on the depth chart. Now, I would not. I'm not anticipating a huge move up here. This is me thinking about how the Browns coaches think about this. This is not me advocating for something or saying this is how I would do it. I have been, I've said it before. I liked Shedeur. You and I are different on this. I liked Shedeur more than I liked Dylan Gabriel coming out of college. That's I would have Shedeur. I would have them at least even, if not Shedeur, a little ahead. You obviously were big on Dylan Gabriel coming out. But what I'll say is this: you're going to hear a lot of discussion. You're going to hear a lot of. It's going to be a hot topic on all the TV shows for the next 3 days because Shedeur is a lightning rod, and people love to talk about him and argue about him. Um, Going into these two practices in Philly, off of a game where he is really the only quarterback in this competition that played, so we don't have anything to compare against. I don't think these coaches are going to make the big move that a lot of folks in our chat are going to want to see. Now, could he get some first team reps on Monday? Maybe. I don't know if they're going to go to Philly though and start giving him first team reps. I agree with Water Tower. I would like to see him continue to get an honest chance, but I think the key word here, if you're watching this competition from the outside with the way the Browns are going to approach this, is patience. And you might not love to hear it, but I think that's going to continue to be the theme of what they do. It's going to be patience.
Well, the thing I would think about and I would address, as I've told a number of people who have uh, reached out to me tonight and said he should be the guy, is, I think you also have to give a little bit of credit to Kevin Stefanski and his staff, right? Because I think of it differently than some in terms of not being held back, actually being guided in the right direction. Because there's nothing worse than being thrown out there as a player in any sport and not know what you're doing or have the right tools or the right fundamentals or the right mechanics or whatever it may be, that kind of got him where he's at. And they have a pick who's a fifth round pick who played really, really well tonight. And I think part of that is not because he's being held back in practice, because he's doing the right things in practice. He seems to be listening. He says all the right things to you guys when he's being interviewed. They do that stuff after practice. He seems engaged. He doesn't have bad body language, so he's carrying himself very well. But I think that's a credit to the coaches. So instead of saying he can do all these things, for me, I think he's doing some of the things he did tonight because of the coaching he's got over the last, all summer and especially the last 10 days of camp. He's really improved his footwork, mechanics, ball handling, footwork from underneath the gun, footwork in the launch points, you name it, all the stuff that we talk about as coaches, he's really improved. And I think that's a credit to how he played tonight, not being held back, but actually, I don't think the next step is let's go from where he's at to he should get all the reps. Let's continue to progress. If that's the route, if he continues to make plays, the NFL is a winning business. He'll get his shot.
I think that's the biggest point. I know everybody wants to just jump to, okay, start Shedeur Sanders week one or whatever. And I don't know, maybe that's where this ends up. Maybe that's the right thing to do. I'll be honest. I'm not excited about any of these other quarterbacks. I'm not, but that doesn't mean that he needs to start week one. But I think the bigger point here is what he has done going back to the spring and all summer and now in this game is every time whatever he's been given, whether it's fourth team reps, third team reps, that one series against the first team tonight in the preseason, getting to play almost 3/4 of football, what he's done is he's taken advantage of every opportunity. And so if he continues to do that, it's going to happen for him. It just will. And it might not be on the timeline everyone else wants. And I know there's people that want us to just sit here and like have a Shedeur Sanders party. That's not what we do. I'm sorry, we don't do that for anybody. Um, but what I'm saying, and to your point, if he just keeps taking advantage like he has so far, like he did tonight, he's got a great attitude. Whenever he speaks, I'm just really impressed with him. I was impressed tonight when he did a sideline interview and he basically said there was stuff I didn't do well. Like he didn't sound happy with his performance tonight, which is great. If he keeps doing that and he keeps performing at a high level, it's going to happen for him. The playing time will find him.
Oh, there's no question. If you keep making plays when they're presented to you, I think you said it best. I go back to day 10, right? So the day 10 at the end of practice, they have their 2-minute drill leading to a field goal. He throws his two best balls of camp, right? He throws a dig to Deontay Johnson, and then he throws a seam route to Floria. They kick the field goal. Comes back the very next drive, he gets 2 sacks, right? So the good and the bad, right? But you saw the progression. That was the first time he was like everybody was watching both. There was no other fields going on, and he did a great job. So you've seen that progression. For me, what I've seen is just the footwork and the fundamentals and the balance. And once again, we talk about a guy who doesn't necessarily have elite arm strength. That elite arm strength is made easier by his accuracy and his anticipation. And when his feet are set and he transfers his weight from his right to his left side, he's really good. That's what you see in empty a lot, right? I've been really impressed with him in empty the last couple of days of practice because he's very sharp with his decision. He knows where he's going with the football. And you said it best. It's a winning league. It's if he keeps doing what he's doing, his chance will come. And just like he's done to this point, he's taken advantage of all these opportunities. And I think they're building him towards whether he's going to be successful or not. They're giving him the tools to do that because without the tools, he has no chance. But I think they're doing a great job, and he did a really, really nice job tonight.
And at some point they're going to be sitting in these rooms and somebody was complaining that we were nitpicking. They're going to be nitpicking him too in that building. They're going to be nitpicking every single thing he does. They're going to be praising the good things too. That's how this business
Yep.
works. Um, Eventually that film is they're going to say like, you know what, he's done enough, we got to see it, and he's doing enough behind the scenes. Let's give him those first team reps. I don't This is just a bad week for it. I mean, I hate to say that, but this is a bad week for it because you got one practice Monday and then you're going to Philly and you're going to have joint practices with the Eagles, and you've got to figure out who your starting quarterback is going to be. And I don't know if they're going to throw that at Shedeur Sanders. He might start that game though in Philly. If I had to bet, I would actually bet that Dylan Gabriel would start that game against Philly and Shedeur would maybe play in the second half. But this is kind of a bad week for them to throw him in with the first team. I would be surprised if they, again, maybe on Monday we see some work with the first team as sort of a, do we want to throw him out there against Philly? But I think it's going to be very heavy Joe Flacco on Wednesday and Thursday when we're in Philly for those joint practices. Maybe Kenny Pickett if he's healthy, and maybe Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur a little bit more on even footing. But I don't think either of those guys are going to get a ton of first team reps against Philly.
Well, I think one of the things that you and I always talk about is Kevin has a plan, right? And he doesn't really care about what anybody else thinks about his plan. So there, as much as this, whether he played wonderfully like he did tonight, or if he was to play less than he did, or whatever it was, he played fantastic. But I still think there's a plan for him, and I still think there's a plan coming in from all summer watching it every practice all summer is that you see the progression of little bit by little bit, through 7-on-7s and some of the formations he's getting and some of the you see the steps coming in terms of the complexity he's getting, and the graduate level work, as Mary Kay would say, in terms of making sure that he can understand all these processes. I think he's doing a great job. But I think Kevin Stefanski has a plan and he sticks to his plan. And I'm all about whether you like the plan or not, it's having a plan is the key for me. So whatever Kevin's plan is with these quarterbacks, it's his plan. And if he sticks to it, then it is what it is. And I think we all have to be comfortable with that. I think that it doesn't. I don't think it hurts anyone that your quarterback that you drafted in the fifth round played really, really well tonight, and that's a good step for the rest of this that quarterback room to have to improve their play as well. So it doesn't hurt to have competition in there, and he's added to it for sure.
And he's ratcheted up the pressure on
Hmm.
everybody. And uh, look, Joyce in the chat says Shedeur has earned some first team reps. I mean, I agree. I would like to see him get some of those. I'm not saying I want to see him get all of Joe Flacco's reps or whatever. Like, I do think he is very slowly earning those reps. I think the time is coming. I think if this were a normal week, maybe we'd see it. And I could be completely misreading this. Maybe they are just going to go pedal to the metal with him. But like you were saying, that's just not their MO normally, and that's not Kevin
Hmm.
Stefanski's MO normally to overreact to preseason games. They're going to continue to follow their plan, I think, and I think those reps are coming. This is just a really tough week, I think, to get some of those reps in when you've got to go play the world champs for two practices.
Well, and when explaining to people like right now, all the practices next week, everything they're running, it's all done. It's all scripted. It's all done. So even though obviously he played well tonight, they still have their plan, and that's kind of a Kevin Stefanski thing. He's a highly organized guy, especially with scripts and things like that. So the Browns and Philly, they've been meeting for they've been talking and doing things for all summer in terms of what they're going to run during practice, how many reps everybody's going to get, coverages they're going to see, things they want to do. There will be a time where they drop the ball and play a little bit, but this, even in these joint practices, it's more of players going against players. Everything is scripted to a T. So the next week's plan, Monday's practice plan, it's all done already. So it's kind of like, how do you involve him more? How do you get him going? But you said it best. If you keep making plays when the plays are presented to you, you'll get your chance. And I think he's done a great job of that. He was very impressive tonight with his poise and his accuracy and the things that we saw forever. We were watching film during our pods last college season.
Okay, Lance, I'm going to let you get yelled at by the chat here.
All right.
I'm gonna put this comment out here. This comes from. Let me make sure I get the name right. This is Nicholas's comment. The problem is you can't say that when Dylan is getting treated like a legitimate candidate to start, while Shedeur isn't even getting frequent second team reps. That makes no sense. So I'm gonna lay back. I don't want to get yelled at by the chat. I'm gonna let you get yelled at by the chat, and you
Well,
can you can try to explain kind of what you're seeing out there and why you think it's been the way it is. At least we don't even have to include tonight. Before tonight, why you think it's been the way that it has been.
Well, once again, I appreciate expectations. Like I said, I never wanted to be a part of anything that doesn't have expectations. So the fact that people are excited about the Browns is always good. So first and foremost, Dylan Gabriel is selected in the third round. So that's the guy they wanted, right? So whether it's a business, right? So whether we like it or not, he was selected in the third round. He fits Stefanski's style, right? First and second down, boot, play action, gets rid of the ball quickly, in the spread sets. He's a highly cognitive guy, processes very well, sets protections, does all these things. I think he fits the mold of what Kevin Stefanski wants mentally. And obviously his height, which I have seen, some of the concerns people have are there. Now, as in practice, as we've watched practice, the thing that doesn't always stick out sometimes is guys are a little bit more gamers, right? And Shedeur is a guy who makes plays when plays are presented to him, and that's just how he's always been. Now he's got to tighten up some of his fundamentals, but as a fundamentally sound, sharp, polished quarterback, Dylan Gabriel is about as good as it gets in terms of fundamentals, drops, footwork, things like that. However, it's a product based business. In the last 3 days of practice, he was not very accurate. And even though everything was very good, he wasn't very accurate. And if you're not very accurate, it's tough to play quarterback, even if you do all that other stuff right. So, and then obviously Shedeur has taken some advantage. And I go back to that 2 minute drill, which he made two huge throws in a pressure type situation, leading to a field goal in practice. So I think Dylan Gabriel is still a really good quarterback. I still think Dylan Gabriel is still in the hunt to be a quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. Obviously, he's got to stay healthy and he's got to be extremely accurate and prove that he's an outlier because he is an outlier at 5'10". We'll see what happens. I still think he up till about day 8, I still thought he was outstanding. He really struggled with his accuracy last 3 days, and that's kind of when Shedeur has started to ascend. We'll call it as we see it when we're out of practice, but I still think Dylan Gabriel can run this style offense that Kevin Stefanski likes to run at a very, very high level.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, look, again, some of what we do here is we try to figure out what they're thinking, right? It's not just what we think. We try to figure out what they're thinking. And the key point that you made just goes back to what we've talked about over and over again. They took Dylan Gabriel in the third round, and they passed on Shedeur Sanders, whatever it was, 5 times, 6 times. Now, that doesn't mean Shedeur Sanders can't be the starter for this football team and can end up being the best of this group. Because talk to Tom Brady, right? You want to go somebody who's not the greatest of all time. Talk to Brock Purdy. Um, like, just because you weren't necessarily the guy they wanted and you were sort of an afterthought in their draft process doesn't mean that you can't ultimately become the guy. And right now, Shedeur Sanders showed us something. And I think he's been showing us things all camp that, like, the accuracy, he is aggressive on that deep ball. Like, that's part of why I want to see him with the first team a little bit. I want to see him throw a deep ball to Jerry Judy. I want to see him take some shots, you know, and so again, whatever you thought of Dylan Gabriel, whatever I thought of Dylan Gabriel, whatever everybody in our YouTube chat thought of Dylan Gabriel, it doesn't matter because the Cleveland Browns thought very highly of Dylan Gabriel, and they're not just going to give up on him. But that being said, at some point, if Shedeur Sanders can just keep pushing, he can push his way, he can push his way past Dylan Gabriel. I don't know how long it's going to take, and I don't know what it's going to take, but it can happen still.
Well, and the thing about what's happening too is that he can, if the more plays he makes, the more the more opportunities he gets, the more when everybody. One of the things that was brought up to me tonight was how is he going to do when he's in there with the starters? Well, two things can happen when you play against starters from other teams. Is first of all, if you throw a post, you're throwing a post to Jerry Judy. That could make you even better than you played tonight. So even though you're going to get some more defensive pressure, you're going to see different fronts, different coverages. You're also going to be playing with elite guys who are players over plays, right? So that helps too. So getting those, you can start seeing him getting some first team reps. But I will say this about Dylan Gabriel, and I'll say this about Shedeur Sanders. This has to be about winning, in my opinion. And if Joe Flacco is gives you the best chance to win, then Joe Flacco is your quarterback for now. It doesn't, but and if those guys earn their spots, and I think you've said that best, Dan. If Shedeur is going to earn those reps, he gets them. But right now, you play the best players because that tells Joe Patonio and Myles Garrett and all these guys that the best guys are playing because winning is still the most important thing.
Yes, and the flip side of that too is if they're out there and they think Shedeur is playing better than Dylan or Kenny or Joe, then you need to pay attention to that too. You can't make decisions necessarily based solely on like what the locker room wants, right? These guys can be it can be a very knee jerk thing, but they're seeing it too. And we talked about a little bit with Deshaun Watson last year when he was struggling. Like, at some point they're sitting in that film room and they're seeing it and they're like, can Jameis do better than this? Like, you start to get those whispers, right? You start to get that. So, uh, you know, uh, this this regime does a really good job of blocking out the noise. They do a really good job of sticking to what they are and sticking to their plan. And again, as great as it was, and I know people don't want to hear this, it was one preseason game. So it was very good and it was a great step in the right direction. Now let's see where it goes from here.
Well, absolutely. Now you start, now you go people, there's two types of good, right? There's good when no one knows you're good. Now everybody knows he's a good football player. And if they thought he was questionable, he's a good football player. So now you're going to start seeing coverages. You're going to start seeing pressure. You're going to start seeing A gap pressure because he likes to move his feet. These defense coordinators are really smart in the NFL. And anytime you see a guy struggle, it usually comes down to now there's film on him. So it'll be really interesting to see the coaching staff and Shedeur move towards the next step, right? When people are taking away the levels, when people are taking away the hitches, and he has to start stretching the ball downfield and not moving his feet in the pocket. Those are all things, those will be the next stepping stones that I think he'll do well on, but there will be a learning curve just like there is for every other rookie. But I think it, like you said, celebrate the victories when you get them. And tonight was a good win, and it was a very well played game by the quarterback, which is something they haven't had a lot of, in the last couple of years, of that consistency. Right? They didn't turn the ball over. They only had a couple penalties. The operation was good. So celebrate those things, because that's the things that kind of going into it is what people wanted. So I think he did. Not only did he throw it well, but they looked like an offense. They looked like an offense that punt the ball well. You always say, I always say, ended every kick, right? They ended it with a kick. They played good defense. They had a couple turnovers. You can win games like that. Make enough plays. He only threw for 138 yards, but he made enough plays. And that's what you got to be when you don't have that elite offense. This is what it looks like, which is beautiful. A win is a win.
All right, I know you want to talk about some other stuff, so let's talk about some other guys that stood out today. So good news and bad news. Our guys that have been really good in camp, Luke Floria, Gage Larvadane, they certainly benefited from their time working with Shedeur Sanders. Looked good today in this game. Now Floria left the game, was ruled out in the third quarter with a hamstring. Heard it on that really nice throw, kind of a drop in the bucket, and Floria made that great one-handed catch. That was one of his best throws too, I thought. And then Gage, I don't think we have word on Gage yet. I have to check to see if Kevin Stefanski said anything, but he was getting his right leg looked at in the fourth quarter after a play. So I don't know what the deal is with him. Obviously, two guys that have built some momentum and I thought had pretty good nights tonight. And I thought tonight was a very, very good night, except for that one decision on that punt return. A very good night for Luke Floria, who I think maybe has lost a little momentum in that race between those two guys. I think he gained some of it back tonight.
I agree with you. So early in camp, you and I were talking about that last week, right? So I thought Gage Larvadam, because I think he can play inside and outside, has really kind of really pushed past Floria in terms of like being able to play multiple positions and stuff where Floria was in the slot. But I thought Floria did himself very well tonight. When you see him back on a punt and kickoff turn, that's a good thing too, right? Because that means he's in the mix there. Like to see him covering some kicks. He's got to be influential on that too. He's got to make some plays on as a gunner too. I think that would really help him. But I thought they both did. And the thing that you saw, those that you and I have watched, all of us have watched for weeks now. Gage Larvadam is open all day, and Floria is open all day, and Caden Davis has had a really good camp. And so those guys, and obviously they like Jamari Thrash. So it's going to be interesting to see those first three. I thought they did a really, really nice job. I thought, offensively, I thought Marshall was very, very impressive with what he did in terms of can he be that pound guy first, second quarter, third quarter, you get a couple runs in there where you're just trying to pound and see the red zone guy. I thought he looked big and strong tonight. But yeah, that receiver spot, Marshall, I thought, Sam Cannella is a guy who just intrigues me too. If they're going to keep four tight ends, if they're going to be in more 12 personnel, I think he's a pretty good player too.
Well, and some of that comes down to who I think your starting quarterback's going to be, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we did see them spread it out a little bit with Shedeur. I think they would spread it out a little bit with Flacco. If we're talking Kenny Pickett, you're probably looking at more of the heavier personnel and some of that heavy play action stuff, move the quarterback type stuff. So I think some of it could depend on who the starter is. But you and I were texting. One of the names that I'm just really intrigued by in this running back room is Travion Williams. We saw him for the
Mm-hmm.
first time tonight, and I just thought that was one of those signings that just kind of gets your attention with the Quinshawn Judkins situation going on. And by the way, did you see Travion Henderson had like a long punt return tonight?
For his first
That
touch,
was
for first touch.
anyway. That's a conversation we might be having one day.
Yep.
Anyway, but I thought Travion Williams was a really interesting signing, a veteran guy with this Judkins situation ongoing. Does he have an opportunity to make this roster? Because you've got Jerome Ford and Dylan Sampson and Marshall, who did look good tonight, really physical runner. That's sort of. I felt like we didn't get a lot of clarity on the running back position tonight. Right now, Jerome Ford didn't play. Dylan Sampson didn't play a lot, so that kind of tells you that those two guys have
Mm-hmm.
pretty big roles. But I didn't feel like we got a ton of clarity on that position behind those guys.
Well, it's interesting because I think Marshall's more of a red zone gap scheme kind of guy, downhill, bull in a china shop kind of. Where Williams, you saw a couple nice really runs. So he comes, yeah, obviously when you run that zone, Taylor zone that you ran in Cincinnati and things like that, he is a very good zone runner. You saw him tonight, even that last couple drives where he takes it play side and then cuts it all the way back and reads those blocks. He's very knowledgeable what he's doing. He's a veteran. He runs that wide zone very, very well, which Kevin obviously loves to run now, going back to his style. So, two different types of backs. It depends on, like you said, is it going to be more 12 personnel where they're using Fannin and Njoku to be in doubles, things like that? It'll be very interesting. I think they're going to do. I think Kevin Stefanski is going to get in 12, and he's going to dictate the personnel you put in, and then go from there. And that makes that back important in terms of if they're going to pound the ball or throw it, because all those guys, I don't know a lot about. We haven't seen Marshall a ton catch the ball. Obviously, Williams catch a little bit, but we know Sampson and Ford and those guys can catch the ball, and you can see a lot of empty out of 12 too. If teams are going to play regular three linebacker personnel against the Browns in that 12.
Yeah, and again, that's one of the things that makes this tough. Some of this stuff tough to figure out is we just didn't see. Njoku wasn't out there. Harold
Hmm.
Fanta didn't play a ton. Like I said, Jerome Ford didn't play. Dylan Sampson didn't play a lot. Pierre Strong didn't play. He's hurt. He was dinged up, so he didn't play. Receiver wise, we didn't see the guys at the top of the depth, which again speaks to how good Shedeur was. Right,
Hmm.
he's throwing to guys who weren't top of the depth chart guys. So that speaks to his performance on defense. I felt like that early series, that early 3-and-out, that was exactly what you wanted to see. It was driven by the front. The third down play, Sam Kamara gets pressure, Alex Wright gets the cleanup sack. To do that with Miles Garrett on the sideline, Mason Graham obviously was in there, but Malik Collins didn't play today. So I thought that first defensive series was a nice start for this defense. Second one left a little bit to be desired, but I thought to have your first series be a 3-and-out, create some pressure, that's what you wanted to see.
Well, yeah, all those guys. There's three guys that I really, really like tonight. First of all, I love Ralph Holly. I think him and Jawan Briggs are guys that give them great energy. They could be the end of the line. They could be the guys that give you a great look in practice. Um, if that was the case, so I thought they played really well. Carson Schwarzenegger is a guy who's all over the field. The guy who's been impressing me the last 3 days of practice and tonight is Christopher Edmonds, the free safety. And the reason I say that is because I've seen him set the edge with Schwartz's defense. I've seen him play almost a nickel backer. I've seen him in the free. I've seen him pretty much everywhere, which is what Schwartz likes to do. Very impressed with his size, his length. I made a couple really nice plays in the red zone going back to day 10. Made a nice play on Njoku, made a nice play on Judy in the flat. And then he made a couple nice plays tonight, both on the line of scrimmage and in the secondary. So I thought the backup secondary, those guys played pretty well tonight, pretty physical. But defensively, for me, it was more about the attitude. A lot of hats to the football. Communication was very good. Lineups were very good. Their gap integrity was very good. They leveraged very well. They didn't get beat outside too much. The touchdown, the touchdown, first touchdown, that one's on McGuire. He'll see that because he got beat outside on contain, and he'll see that. That's just a pass rush move. He's got to make sure he keeps his outside arm free. But I thought the defense as a whole, um, besides the players, you take the names off the back. I thought they played like a Schwartz defense, right? Just swarming, running around, sense of urgency. You're coming off a bad football season. There should be no easy nights. There should be no easy plays. Every play should look like that. And I thought they did a really nice job.
Yeah, and I think when you look at some of these, yes, you mentioned a guy like Jawan Briggs. You mentioned Edmonds, who has been getting a lot of work with Delpit, not doing team stuff for the last like week and a half or so. So we're seeing a lot of him. I think it's important for people to remember that the Browns, we talk so much about the 53-man roster, right? But the Browns actually really view this as like a 69-man roster. So you got your 53, and then anybody who clears waivers, you can put on your practice. You can sign to your practice squad if they want to stick around. So they really use that practice squad a lot. So that's where one of these receivers could end up. That's where a Jawan Briggs could end up, like last year. That's where an Edmonds could make the roster. Edmonds could end up on the practice squad. I think I had him on my 53 that I posted this morning. So it, the, a lot of these guys, they might not necessarily make the 53, but they'll stick around. They'll be on the practice squad. They'll get elevated. They'll get playing time. So it's important to kind of keep an eye on who's out there when these starters aren't playing, especially early in the game, because these are the guys that they really are taking a look at and have a chance to either make the roster or stick around on that practice squad and be one of their game day elevations.
You look like Tony Brown and Newsium. These guys, I mean, they're really close to playing, right? And I've always appreciated, and obviously, I don't go to a lot of NFL camps, but being down the Browns, everybody says, does Shedeur get the this? Does the backup. The thing that I love about the Browns, if you go down and watch the defensive line practice or the offensive line practice, everybody who's on that line, both sides, they get coached up incredibly hard and are incredibly important. From if talking to Holly or you're talking to Miles Garrett, those guys are always so hard. They're coached really, really hard, and they're always involved. So I think it's important that they get these guys, keep these guys in the practice squad, because then if there's injuries, which there will be, you get guys up and their learning curve isn't so much. You have to call them up on a Tuesday or whatever it may be because they're going to play. They know the system, and I think that's very, very important. Because obviously injuries are going to happen. But I think some of the depth issues that the Browns, I saw coming in, maybe they do have some answers. Obviously, we're going to see more when they get to Philly, and like I think these 2 days in Philly are probably as important as any 2 days this whole season. Not the game. The Wednesday and Thursday's practices are huge for the Browns.
Oh, listen, this is a good show because somebody just called me an idiot for something I didn't say. I did not say Shedeur Sanders will be on the practice squad. I said we were talking Edmonds, we were talking Florio, we were talking Gage Larvadane. I did not say Shedeur Sanders will be on the practice squad. So anyway, got to respond to that one. This is one. This is one you will like, Lance. Let me put it up on the screen. Special teams looked special tonight. Bubba Ventrone's unit looked pretty good. They were out there making plays. They were out there. They forced a turnover early in the game. So we're talking guys that have a real chance to make this team as special teamers. A guy like Buki Watt. I know Buki Watson recovered. Did he force? I can't remember. I'll have to look that up.
No,
But
if it was a fumble, then Watson just the game he muffed
yeah, it
it
was
and
a
Watson
muff. It
picked
was a
up.
muff.
Yep.
That's what it was. Thought they did a nice job. The special team showed up. Now Hopkins did miss a kick late in the game. Had one that he almost missed too. I'm still a little nervous about him, but the special teams unit looked good tonight, which is that they need that group to be really good.
Well, here's how the Browns are going to win games, right? They're going to stop the run. They're going to do all the things, but you have to. There's three phases, and I know it's cliche, but right now the Browns on offense probably they're not going to win every game on offense. They'll win some, but they have a chance to win a lot of games on defense. They won't win them all, but they'll win a ton. But you can win every game on special teams, and it doesn't mean you could lose the other two and still lose the game. But that special teams has got to be a wash, or it has to be what it is tonight. Create a turnover. I think it's more important when they get the ball. It's hard to go 90 yards against a pressure front like the Cleveland Browns. I don't care who you are as an NFL. It doesn't mean you can't do it, but it's going to be hard to do it over the course of 4 to 7 drives a game where you have to go 90 yards because Bjork's punch you inside the 10. So though, obviously covering kicks is important. The kickoff team, all those things are very important. Field position is huge. Start inside the 10-yard line. All those things are huge because that's how right there is how you saw how the Browns are going to win, right? Make enough plays on offense, play really good defense, win special teams. That's how you can win a lot of games at a lot of levels. And that's how the Browns are going to have to do it until they get this offense going, which I still think will be better than people think because of the physicality up front.
Let's go back to the defense. I want to ask you this because I'm looking at again some of the notes I had, and I was kind of keeping track of who was playing when. We talked about the edge rushers, right? Alex Wright, Isaiah McGuire. Couple names that have stood out during camp and that I thought it was interesting. They were playing up a little bit tonight. Cam Thomas was playing early in the game. Julian Aquara. We don't talk about him a lot, but I think he's a guy. I think he's a guy they really like, kind of a low key signing that they really like. He played up. We didn't see a lot of Joe Tryon Shoyinka. I don't think. Maybe I missed him out. I think he did. He did play on like the second series or the
Mm-hmm.
third series, but I don't think he played after that. But Cam Thomas and Aquara are two guys, and I hope I'm saying his name right, are two guys that I've just sort of have circled because when I'm standing there watching practice, we're seeing those guys get some first team reps opposite Miles Garrett. We're seeing them get some second team work. So what do you think of this edge group and sort of who are some names that you're keeping an eye on?
Well, Cora's Cam Thomas and Cora. Those are two great calls. Cora is he worked a fantastic, like almost like a ghost dip rip tonight for a sack. He comes off the edge really really hard. And with those guys are like designated specialists. Now Cam Thomas for me fits the Schwartz scheme, right? Because he's 6'5", 6'5" plus. He's 270 pounds, and he can play down at the three technique. He brings tremendous energy. He's not an overly bendy guy. He's not an overly like twitchy guy. But what he is he just keeps coming. and he's long. He's got long arms, and what he does, it gives you depth, right? So the Browns now are creating this depth where they can bring in guys who have tremendous motors going against offensive lines that might be a little bit tired come that second, third, fourth quarter, right? So they're going to come at you in waves with Miles Garrett and Troy Shayanka and Collins and Graham, and then you bring in these guys that have great motors and great length and great pass rushing ability. Cam Thomas has been a guy kind of show. It's funny you say that because I think I've watched Cam Thomas play everything. Right, he's been on like scout special teams, and then he'll be out there with the ones and twos. He's kind of just like he just plays right, and he does whatever he's asked to do. And Okawara is a lot more athletic than people give him credit for. He's really really good off the edge. So I think they're building once again. There's guys that are going to that might not make this team that are really good football players on that defensive line. That defensive line is 9, 10, 11 deep with guys who can make plays. And I think that's, Schwartz is probably going to fight for all those guys because he likes to come at you in waves.
And the thing these guys keep saying is win your one-on-one matchups. If you have a bunch of guys out there that can win your one-on-one matchups, guess who's on that end over there? And all of a sudden he's freed up because you've got to go. Now you got to help against Malik Collins and Mason Graham and whoever's that second edge rusher. If they can find some legit pass rushing from that second spot from some guys that they're kind of rolling through there, all of a sudden 95's life gets a little bit easier. It's never going to be easy, but it gets a little bit easier if now you've got three other guys on that line who can win matchups if you leave them one on one.
Well, and here's where the fast linebackers come in, right? If you saw tonight, I can't wait to go back and look at my notes and get the notes done. But the Browns are going with a ton of double A gap mug blitzes, right? So they're going to line up their wide three, their wide five with their four defensive linemen, and then they're going to walk those two linebackers up right next to the center, right in those opposite A gaps. And people always say, "Why do you do that?" Well, the reason the Browns are doing that for exactly what you said, Dan, they're trying to find one-on-one matchups because once those linebackers walk up, it's a six-man front. And that offensive line and that quarterback and that running back have to prepare for a six-man blitz. Even though for the most part it's going to be a 4 or 5 man blitz, you don't know who's coming. And when you don't know who's coming, that's where the one-on-one matchups are created because you got to account for all six. So because those linebackers can run so well, Schlesinger, Baker, all these guys, you're going to see a ton of that this year, especially on third down, where they're going to be in a 4-man front. They're going to walk those two linebackers up inside and try to find those one-on-one matchups, which they're going to win a bunch because they have a bunch of guys who can really pass rush. But it starts by throwing those two linebackers. That's what creates that those one-on-ones for those defensive linemen, especially those ends.
I'm going to say this too. There's going to be a lot of Twitter clips going around on Sundays of Carson Schlesinger
Oh,
filling
there's
gaps and making run stops. Like,
well,
like
he's
I
so
just I spotted it tonight a few times. Like, oh, there's 49 right where he needs to be.
instinctually he when you next time, every time you watch a game, watch when they show the highlights, watch when he sees a double team. So he'll see the guard and the tackle start to block the three technique, and it looks like he's on a rubber band. It looks like he's shot out of a cannon into that B gap every single time. So yeah, he's very instinctual. I think you're right. I think he there you don't lose JOK, you don't replace JOK, but he's going to lessen this because not only is because he's a great football player, but he's the guy you can already tell he's mature beyond his years, and he's a guy that can help get those guys organized and let those other linebackers run around and hit people, which is what they're good at. So I think Carson Schlesinger is going to be a really special linebacker for the Browns this year.
All right, let's try and get this thing to an even hour. Lance, I know you got a ton of notes. I know I brought up a bunch of stuff, but probably nothing close to what you've wanted to talk about. So now it's your turn. Throw something at me.
Well, I think the thing that I really want to see with the Browns is that tonight was the physical run game, right? And what you saw early on is I've tried to explain this to people. The Browns have not been very successful during camp running the ball in A and B gap. And that's kind of the power run. You get the inside zone and you get the duo, right? Where you're getting big double teams inside. Well, that's really hard to do against the Browns because the Browns are just running through gaps and being disruptive. So it's really hard, especially when you're learning, you're practicing that. Tonight you saw some physicality that wasn't outstanding, and it won't be like it will with Teller and those guys, but you saw the commitment to the run that I like to see in terms of like after a big play, come back and run a weak side zone. After a big, come back and run a one back pounder. That just kind of wears on the defense. That shortens the game. That keeps the ball from the offense. There's a lot of things that go into like the whole makeup of a football game, but I'm starting to see that because the Panthers aren't that type of defense, you saw some double teams and you saw some guys getting moved tonight, which is promising because it's really hard to do against the Browns defense because of the size and the style they play. So for me, I think Browns fans should be excited because they're committed to the run which will help them win football games, which ultimately should be the goal, right? Win football games. You got to shorten the game, run the ball, stop the run. I was very impressed with just like the commitment to it and like kind of the style they're getting back to. I think it's going to be very conducive to being in games late.
And you mentioned it. This wasn't Joel Bitonio and Wyatt Teller and Jack Conklin and Dewan Jones, Ethan Posick. It wasn't that group out there for them. And when you talk to those guys, like to a man, especially those interior guys, and you ask them, like, yeah, they don't mind pass blocking, right? They understand it's 2025. You're going to pass block a lot now. You ask them about run blocking, and you get into one of those drives where Kevin Stefanski just decides we are going to run this ball until you can stop it, and they love that. You just feel it. Like these O linemen feel like when that defense starts to wear down, and when you get to be an O lineman that gets to attack instead of being passive, it creates an energy on that offense.
Well, I've heard this from Jack. I've heard it from three starting offensive linemen now. You're going to hear this term a lot from Bloomgren, marry the run with the pass. And people are like, what does that mean? Well, it's a fancy way of saying that if a defensive lineman knows that you're going to throw the ball, he usually gets a little bit wider because he's not worried about the run game. What marry the run and the pass means is that the Browns will, on most of their plays, will show run first, even on their pass blocking, right? So if you show run first, that defensive lineman has to honor what you're doing. And as he does that, he gets locked in, and then you can be physical with him. Where the Browns struggle, the guards struggle, is when that guy goes, oh, you're going to pass block? I'm just going to get wide of you, Teller, because you're big and strong, and I'm going to try to push you on the edge. So marrying the run with the pass means that defensive line is always ready to get hit in the face with the run, even if they're not. And if you're preparing that way and you prepare that way during the week, the pass rush isn't as intense because you got to stop the run first. That's what these guys do best, and that's what they're going back to.
All right, give me something else. What else have you got in those notes? Deep in those notes.
All right.
This
Well,
is
let's
like
see.
the dark web version of Lance's notes.
All right. Let's see. Well, I thought once again, I know it's boring, but special teams I thought were really, really good all night. And it sounds kind of
Mm-hmm.
funny, but those when you have good special teams, it leads to good defense. My other thing that I have in my notes is turnovers, right? So Browns get two, they don't give up any. You win a bunch of games if you don't turn the ball over. All right, let me get into my notes here, my deep notes. All right.
Well, it's funny. I mean, this stupid sport. We sit here and talk about it constantly. We do 5 podcasts a week. We've been sitting here talking for an hour. And how often does it just come down to you turned the ball over 3 times and you didn't, so you
That's
won?
it.
you know, like that's absolutely part of why the Browns were so bad last year is because they turned the ball over a bunch and they didn't force any turnovers. Like you're just not going to win football games at any level if that's the case.
All right, so here's my last notes I took. So winning is simple, right? We don't turn the ball over. Browns don't turn the ball over. They tackle in space. They get lined up. They don't have any stupid mistakes in terms of like just random, like they have a couple offsides and things like that, but not a lot of like unwanted. Some penalties you just can't hold. They didn't have a ton of offsides by the defensive line. Like I said, they tackled, they tackled, they tackled. I have it 3 times in capital letters because they didn't tackle very well last year. And if you can't tackle in a pressure front, you're going to be in man, you're going to get beat. Um, Secondly, I thought the second offensive line held up a lot better than it did in camp the last couple. It tells you the strength of the Browns defense line because I thought they held up pretty good in pass protection and I thought they had some pretty good movement. Um, I'm interested to see who the linebackers are going to be as I'm getting deep into my notes, right? So we got Schlesinger, we got Baker. Who's going to be the third or fourth guy, and are they going to be a nickel more? The other thing I have is who's going to be the nick? Who's going to be down? Is Delpit going to be specifically down in the box? If that's the case, who's the free? Because that's one of the questions that wasn't answered tonight. Um, that's pretty much
I want to say something. I was talking to somebody during practice. I think it was the last time we were out there in Berea. And they are using some safeties in practice, and I didn't notice if they did this tonight. They were using some safeties in the slot. Um, I'm a little torn on Grant Delpit covering the slot because the last time I saw it in a real game, every time he was covering Mark Andrews, Lamar Jackson's eyes lit up in Week 18. But also, he did a pretty good job against Mark Andrews in that game. So so I'm a little torn. Like, do you want Grant Delpit working in the slot? Do you want him working against bigger tight ends and maybe split out, or do you like him? Is that a bad role for him? I guess. What do you think?
I don't think it's a bad role at all. I think it down inside. I think even he covers within 5 yards better, right? So some guys are just space guys, right? And some guys are better in space than other. Grant Delpit to me likes to fight in a phone booth, and he when he's blitzing, when he's doing all that stuff. So for me, I like when he's on a tight end, or even if he's on a big slot, but he's closer, right? Because then he can use his hands. I think if he gets a speed slot, you got to help over the top, right? You got that one high, then you got other good cover guys. Make sure you always don't put him in a bad spot. But I think he can match up with any tight end in the NFL for the most part, especially if they're getting pressure and they're trying to get the ball downfield. Remember, I think these guys work better in short areas because they're assuming that the defensive line is going to get pressure. So that's how they practice. And when you practice that way, it's all a dance, right? I'm assuming you're going to get home defensive line, so I don't have to cover these guys, 17 yards downfield. So I'm going to make sure they're covered within 17 or something like that. So I don't know. I like Delpit down in the box covering. I like Delpit blitzing. I like Delpit setting the edge. I like Delpit playing football. It kind of goes back to, some guys are football players, some guys are position guys. For me, Grant Delpit is a football player. He can play the free two once in a while. He can play wherever. He's just a really good football player. He's got to be where there's plays being made. If it's the Ravens, cover Andrews because that's who Jackson's going to look for. I just like him down in the box because I think he can be involved in so much more because of his athleticism and his toughness.
Okay, well, this was a fun night of football. I mean, for preseason games, which can sometimes be a grind, we got a really good, great quarterback performance. We got lots of good stuff from this Browns defense. I thought lots of good special teams play. We talked about a lot of it. This was a good preseason football game, Lance, and I know that you are looking forward. Uh, you and I and Ashley, Mary Kay, the whole crew, we're going to be in Philadelphia here in about what is it? We're recording this late on Friday. It's almost Saturday, so it's getting close. We're going to be in Philly real soon, watching these guys go against the world champs. It's starting to get exciting.
Yeah, like I said, I think these 2 days are super, super exciting. And like you said about tonight's game, the thing that I liked about the Browns is that they weren't very good last year, and I thought, when a lot of people don't get it, my favorite quarter of preseason game, I'm probably alone on this, is the fourth quarter because those are the guys fighting for jobs, and when you see those guys fighting for jobs, it kind of tells you the atmosphere and culture that you have in your locker room. And I thought the Browns did a great job. All those younger guys and guys who don't get a ton of reps in practice, flying around and making plays and understanding their assignments, being coachable. But yeah, you got good quarterback play, some good defensive plays, you got some turnovers. Um, a very good night of football for a preseason game. I think these are important though for the Browns this year. I really do, more than I have in my first 4 years here.
Okay, Browns practice on Monday. Then they head to Philly for joint practices Wednesday and Thursday. They play the Eagles preseason game on Saturday. Obviously, Lance was on this pod. Mary Kay, Ashley, and I are going to get together. I don't know if we're going to add to this tonight or if we're going to talk tomorrow. Mary Kay is in Carolina at the moment, writing a million stories. So we wanted to get something live and we wanted to get something potted before it got too late. But we'll circle back and talk a little more Shedeur Sanders here in the next day or so. Probably hear from Lance when we get to Philly, all of that stuff. So yeah, Kenny, Lance, listen, our guy Kenny here thinks we're haters for some reason. 12 killed it. We're haters because we spent a half hour talking about how good Shedeur Sanders looked. We're
He looked great.
haters.
You know what? I understand. Once again, I will say this without hesitation. I love passion. I love expectation. Right.
It's
So
hey, look, you're watching, you're interacting with us. Maybe you don't like us, but that's okay. We like having you around, Kenny.
you know what? And you're right. I mean, he played wonderfully tonight, and not hating on him. I want him to be successful. There's be some goods and bads, but yeah, interesting.
All right. It's going to be a wild month here before the start of the season. That's for sure.
No, no
Lance,
doubt.
I appreciate the time. Lots of you watching this on YouTube, obviously, but for those of you who catch this on the pod, we were live on our YouTube channel. That's Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. Check that out. If you're watching on YouTube, you want to check out the pod, Orange and Brown Talk on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Our football insiders were awesome tonight. Our texters, cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner. at the top of the page. One of our texters informed me that he was going to get blitzed tonight because Shedeur is the guy. So our texters were having a good night on it. So again, that's Football Insider, cleveland.com/Browns Blue banner at the top of the page. Lance, I appreciate you doing this right after the game. I think we should probably do it again sometime.
Absolutely. I'll see you very soon.
All right. Talk to you later. Thanks for watching, everybody.